Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 621 with our review of An American Pickle. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a streaming platform near you. This week, we are talking about a film coming to HBO Max. So if you have that service, you will be able to watch this film. But yeah, Stephen, my question for you is, we've seen a few films recently that involved food as one of the central focal points of the film. Obviously, this is called An American Pickle and involves pickling and presenting pickles. There's an interesting scene where, our character begins to sell pickles in Brooklyn to a bunch of hipsters. And my question for you, twofold, Stephen, is how much did you want those pickles? And what do you think the appropriate price is for hipster pickles?
Good question. So I didn't want those pickles in particular at the very beginning for contextual reasons, but I definitely wanted a nice fat artisan pickle, maybe with some kind of spicy rub put on top or something. I feel like that'd be really good. I was thinking about it quite a bit. At this point, I don't know. We have pickles in the apartment. That has been one of the things that we've bought, but not really going fancy, just your standard pickle spears.
Yeah.
I feel like I would pay pretty good money for a street vendor artisan pickle right now. Maybe I forget how big they were. Were they I'm going to hold up for the podcast audience. Were they yay big?
I guess it kind of depend because he had jars of varying sizes, right? In theory, he was walking into the equivalent of a Whole Foods and just buying cucumbers to turn into pickles. Yeah. So, standard grocery cucumber size, I guess, is potentially the largest pickle.
Yeah. So a nice grocery cucumber size pickle of that quality, I'd probably pay $6.50 for it. I feel like that's what I would do. If we're talking small, you're not really full afterwards, then maybe bump it down to $4. But yeah. I think that'd be about my range.
Well, you are a fan of the pickle.
Oh yeah, I'm a fan of the pickle.
Yeah. one of my memories as a kid growing up at Oceanside was to go walk along the pier, and there was this little shop halfway down the pier, and the guy had just a giant tub of pickles, and you could buy them for, I don't remember what they were. They were probably $1 or something like that. And you just buy a big old jumbo pickle and just walk along the pier, just chomping on this pickle. It was great times. So I definitely, even though they were kind of comedically presenting the smells and the aromas coming off those pickles. And as you said, contextually, maybe we wouldn't want to eat those specific pickles in that moment, but it still made me damn, I could use some funky, just a nice funky pickle.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be good times.
Give me a kimchi flavor pickle, like some of that nice funk. That would be real good. We also, right before recording, we're talking about you frying food and about how probably bacteria dies in the oil. And I kind of had the same thought when watching the pickle scenes in this movie that, the brining process makes it fine.
Yeah, he was brining them incredibly fast though. And I don't know how long that I have definitely put cucumbers into vinegar and water and salt in my fridge and eaten it the next day and been totally stoked by it. But it definitely wasn't pickle yet. It was just cucumber salad.
Yeah. It is kind of weird that pickling is an act like curing or anything else, but cucumber just got to be what pickle means. This is part of my stand-up routine I'm working on. What's next? We're going to fry potatoes and just call them fries? What?
We're leaving it in. But yeah, that's our conversation about pickles. I think it's in every episode we have to talk non-expertly about some topic that potentially there could be somebody listening who is an expert on the field.
So non-expert question, does brining remove bacteria? If I pickle raw meat, would it be safe to eat the meat after that? Ceviche is kind of similar to that, but I've always wondered what makes that okay.
I want to answer the question, but I don't want to give bad medical advice to people listening to the podcast. Yeah, guys, just throw that steak in some pickle juice and you're good.
I bet it'd be great. Pickled tartare. Ooh.
Anyways, what do you say, Steven? We get into something we also probably can't speak expertly about.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we're going to take a listen to the trailer for An American Pickle, and then we're going to come back and give you guys our review.
Amo, als ik arbeidsjaar in Schuur een weerreich.
Wie reich?
Zo reich, als ik zo opzollen mijn eigen met
In old country of Slupska, I am ditch digger. As far as jobs in Slups go, it's pretty good. We are the Greenbounds, and we have American dream. I find good job in pickle factory. Sarah, I make this vow. In 100 years, our family will prosper. And then one day, everything changed.
It's been 100 years. The pickle brine preserved him perfectly.
You're too old to do that.
The world has changed. Everyone I know is gone.
You were able to track down a great-grandson.
Greenbaum? This is nuts.
Walk past the cafe, but you don't need when you live to.
Your parents, where are they? They passed away. It was a car crash. He will tell me everything of their deaths, how their bodies died, their faces as the life left. We will bond over our pain. Mm-hmm.
Oh no, love, you're not alone.
I understand why you're a religious person, but I'm not. How do you grieve for dead parents? Doing okay.
Head all tangled up.
I have an idea. They start pickle business. That's a very stupid idea, Herschel.
You have no wife, no children, no friends, no job. You need help. I'm fine.
You're not alone.
We will become success.
Wow. Ooh, very pungent.
Yeah, that's straight from the devil.
We will finally make dead parents proud. Don't talk about my parents.
You never met them.
You have captivated the hearts of the entire world.
I'm probably not best case scenario for what the family's become. In old country, we have saying. I'm sure this has aged well. If man does not throw punch, it is because this man secretly had polio arm. Do something, Ben. Throw your punch!
You know they cured polio, right? A guy named Jonas Salk.
Was he Jew?
He was.
Yes. Is this your father? No, that's David Bowie. Is this your mother? No, that's also David Bowie. That whole poster's David Bowie.
All right, so that was the trailer for An American Pickle. It is the story of a immigrant working at a pickle factory in Brooklyn, and he falls one day and lands in a big old tub of pickle brine, and that brine preserves him for 100 years, and he wakes up in current day and has to reconnect with his, I almost called him long lost, but basically his great-grandson, and try to reinsert himself into the world, having been absent for the last 100 years. So, Stephen Miller, what did you think of An American Pickle?
So I thought this was a brilliant idea for a movie. I feel like the Simon Rich short story of this movie I will enjoy a lot. Like it's kind of like what he did with Man Seeking Woman, of taking a metaphor, a concept of a thing about yourself you're wrestling with, in this case your Jewish heritage, and how do you feel about that in a world that is changing and where you know that you have separated from it, but you still have things that you respect or want to keep of it, making it literal and wacky and just drawing it to the furthest conclusion. I did not think the movie executed it very well. I'm going to be honest. This is a 90-minute movie. It felt like 3 hours to me. The pacing of it really didn't work on me very well at all. And I think it's just that once the premise is established, watching them go through the motions just didn't give me a whole lot of joy. The first part of this movie is kind of the Elf effect. It's like the fish out of water, right? Seth Rogen's Herschel is walking around New York and he is discovering things that he would have never understood 100 years ago in his Eastern European place where he lived. And I'm sorry. I felt that stuff just kind of like brutally unfunny. Like the learning about milks in the refrigerator and being wowed by taxi cabs and by the size of apartments. There was just something there where like I got it. I don't know what they would have done differently, but it just like wasn't landing on me all that well. And then the movie veers into the man-seeking woman direction of like, we are going to take these ideas of the war of identities and we are going to make them really, really heightened and completely ridiculous. And I had a little more fun with that, but it's still just, I don't know, it felt like a dragged out episode of a TV show to me. Like it didn't feel like a movie in the way that I wanted. And I don't know if it was just me, my mood, if like we are just not in a time right now where a movie about Seth Rogen coming to terms with his Jewishness is like maybe a year ago I would have been like way more into that story. But for some reason I don't know, the more extreme Herschel gets, the less it is the movie I think I wanted of like two people begrudgingly coming to understand one another, and it becomes more of like a sketch show in a way that just didn't completely gel with me. Like I thought it was completely clever and fine. It was completely fine the whole way through. I had like no problem with it. It's like well done enough. You know, the bits on paper are funny and like I get it. I like the parable, but I don't know. I just didn't really have fun with this. I was expecting a lot more of it. So I was kind of let down by this pickle, TBH. What about you, Chris?
Well, Steven, I was kind of let down by you. I actually really, really like this movie.
Thank God.
I won't try to convince you that this film is funny and firing on all the comedy cylinders. I will also lay all my cards on the table. As it started and he's trying to dig a ditch and his digging utensils keep breaking, I was laughing.
Okay, so you were in at the tone of this movie at the very beginning.
I was in to the like just him buying the fish, like and her just eating the fish immediately. Like
I liked all that stuff. I liked the prologue quite a bit.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, like the entire opening that gives us the backstory of Herschel. Like that, I was laughing and giggling at certain things. I think that not all the comedy works 100% of the time. But I think that the characters feel real and honest enough that their interacting sort of gets past the lack of comedy. Like specifically the talking about the milks, and like, once again, joking about Alexa and him wanting to fight the cab because he doesn't know what this like vehicle is, even though there's 20 other vehicles on the road when the cab drives up. Those sort of things don't work for me. But I think that this film actually handles the fish out of water in a more touching sort of way than other things. Like, other films, like you said, like Elf, it's trying to go for absurdly funny. And as I've mentioned on the podcast before, the first time I saw Elf, I hated it, and that was not funny to me at all. But like even in things like, even like the trailer for the someday will actually get released Wonder Woman sequel, there's the scene where, she's like walking through the park and she's like, oh, all of this is art. And he's like, this is art? And she's like, that's a trash can. And like, it's playing off her being a fish out of water in the first film. Like, that's just supposed to be a joke. There's nothing behind that. But I actually really, really liked watching Herschel, like, think of the things that were luxuries for him in his time and then be impacted by the fact that they're readily available to everyone else. It wasn't that they were funny. It was that he was endearing in the way he was like thinking about those situations. And I love that aspect of things. As you said, later on in the film, things start to veer to absurdist territory where he is stating beliefs that he may have that maybe society doesn't agree with 100 years in the future. But at the same time, he he is stating things because that's what he knew as he was living, and he doesn't actually have ill will towards all these people. He's just saying horrible shit, right? So it's kind of like, once again, there's still like a strange, endearing thing about him where you're like, oh no, and now he's sticking his foot in his mouth. Like, come on, just don't say those things. And like, I found this to be an incredibly touching film. You already like joked about Seth Rogen getting back in touch with his Jewish heritage and stuff like that, but all of that 100% worked for me. Like, I found this an incredibly moving film. It didn't like bring me to waterworks like some of the other films that we've seen recently, but I definitely got like close to misty by the end of this film.
Got a little briny.
Yeah, I got a little briny. It's like, oh no, it's just pickle juice in my eye. But I think that I was prepared for a strange film that would be just silly, and what I got was a film that was less silly than I expected, but way more touching than I expected. And I found myself rooting for the character, rooting for the transformation of characters that might stand in his way, and really just like wanting to see him succeed as he tries to go off in his world. I mean, I also had the idea of like, where is he living every night, and where is he getting money to do any of these things? Like, there are a bunch of things where like I'm suspending belief as I watch the film, but I still was constantly with this film along every single beat of the film and really having a good time, both like gratifying emotional feeling towards the film and also honestly like laughing like throughout, not constantly, but definitely throughout. I had fun.
Yeah. I don't want to take that away from you. I was going to open my review saying I really hope you enjoyed this movie a lot. Because I get that sometimes a comedy especially either just clicks or it doesn't click. And if it doesn't click, it can be hard to change that. I don't think there was anything about this movie that was like poorly made, or like there was nothing in it where I was like, I get why this isn't funny to me. It just lacked the oomph that I wanted. And I think a part of it, and I wonder how this worked for you, is you talk about the touching part, in particular, Herschel's experience in this brave new world. And what I felt kind of alienated by is the movie, I feel like the movie doesn't really put you in his point of view in a very meaningful way. The movie makes him be the other, like the foil to the main character. Even when we are watching him, I feel like we are not getting inside his head. You know, we're not learning the ins and outs of his life. We're not seeing anything but the bluster. And I'm wondering if that did that hurt it for you, or you still felt like you could extrapolate enough that you were like empathizing with the character of Herschel and not just what he means for Ben?
So I found, I mean, for obvious reasons, which we probably won't talk about in this review, I feel Ben is the outsider in this story. And I think maybe if there wasn't that prologue where we get to experience Herschel's, like, kind of the chronology of his life and where he gets his dreams from, maybe without that, I would have felt like I'm an outside observer from him. But because because that's, like, the text of the film, I never left his POV. Like, he encounters, like, we have to spend time with Ben because of how he is affecting Herschel's trajectory through his arc. But really, we're only cutting to him to see the stuff that Herschel doesn't see him doing, and to see kind of where his state of being is throughout this whole film. And I think that we're always, though, watching the progression of the story from Herschel's point of view. And I think that, like, I kind of latched onto him in that beginning and that opening, and like his dream of what happens when he makes it to America and sees the Statue of Liberty, and like is like, I'm here, I'm gonna build this dream. One day I will be able to drink seltzer. like I'm already primed to look at everything that transpires in this film through his grasp of what he's trying to do. And I think I was able to stick there and follow him the whole time, especially because at various points in this film, others throughout the city begin to latch on as well and to sort of support him or not support him depending on what's going on. And I felt it did a good job of keeping me locked to him. And I never felt ripped away from him. You know, there's a little transition for like 5 minutes where you're specifically pulled away from him to see something else. But besides that, I was very centered on Herschel, and kind of Ben was the outsider that I was watching.
Yeah, see, that's interesting, because when I think about it, you're right that the movie is following Herschel almost all of the time. I just feel like the way, for me, his character wasn't given very much depth. Like, a lot of his behavior, especially when the pickle business is up and running and it becomes this kind of escalation of
specifically the business
ideas.
He tries to start making pickles, not like shenaniganry that happens surrounding pickles.
Right. No, the business he creates when the empire starts to bloom. I feel like even though we are watching him, and maybe this is like it being a short movie, even though again it felt kind of long to me, is that I feel like you're only ever seeing him as outsiders would see him. Like you are seeing him as a bit or a punchline. And I don't mean that it like doesn't do right by the character. Like, I think what he means to Ben is very clear, but I think there are moments in this movie where the ideas that he expresses and the choices that he make, they only work because we are laughing at him. We are not identifying with him in those moments. And I don't know, it is a weird dynamic, because you're right, the camera's following him the whole time, but I just never really felt like it was mining how would he see New York City. Like, he becomes this callous, this like bluster that just has to project confidence all the time, and we never really see that crack at all in the movie, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think in a roundabout way of trying to like explain why it worked for me is I'll say there are two brilliant things that this film does. One is that though the character is suddenly waking up in 100 years in the future, he had this goal to create like offspring that by 100 years in the future would have achieved some goal. He wakes up and is immediately found by scientists who explain to him what the situation is. So it's not like he just appeared, right? He's not like a Terminator who warped in like a lightning bubble and now he's trying to figure out where he is, right? He's somebody who was primed and said, hey, look, here's the deal. You fell into pickles. You understand how pickle branding works. Like, you've woken up now. It's way in the future. We found your great-great-grandson or great-grandson or however many years it's been, 100 years. I don't know how many generations that is. Great-great? Great-great. Anyways.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. No, it's just his great-grandson, I think.
Okay, great-grandson.
Great.
But anyway, so he is kind of like, he's surprised by the state of the world, but he already is willing to accept the changes because he knows that everything has changed. So it's kind of like he's just there. It's not him discovering the world. It's not Encino Man, right? It's somebody who's like, you're just here now and everything's fine. We're all happy to have you. Let's do something together, right? And the second thing is that half of his limited view on the world is used as a driving force for Ben, right? Like, yes, he has his own view of the world, but some of those views are strength of family and having goals and doing things to honor like the legacy that you have on this earth. And it's things that Ben doesn't care about because he's just a hipster in Brooklyn. And I think that like some of the things are jokey, but some of the things are really like taking a simplistic view of things that have actual meaning that we might take for granted as people in modern day. And I think it really, really works to kind of like take that time of like, what if you applied old values to modern day and tried to elevate that in the way we interact with each other and the way we go about the careers we want to do and like the effort we put into doing something. Like I found it really, really interesting how they used that fish out of waterness as a motivator for somebody who's in the water.
Yeah, no, I get it. I wish that stuff had worked for me well. One thing that did work for me just fine is how completely not seriously the movie is taking the plot. Like there is a great scene when he first gets out of the pickle brine where there's like a press conference and everyone is asking questions and Yeah, there's basically a moment where they're like, you had better answer this because it's very complicated. And then it like skips the answer. And then they're like, that makes complete sense. I don't have any other questions about the plot. And then they move on.
That was like, it's one of my favorite moments in the film because it's so fucking clever. It's just like, he explained. They believed.
Though, I don't know, sometimes the insanity, like how absurd they let it get, didn't work for me, even though I love the things that it is not referencing, but at least like the tone that it is cribbing from. Like there's the trial scene late in the movie, which is just like a who's who of sketch actors, like Nick Robinson is there and Betsy Sidaro and all these people. And it is so ridiculous in the way that like I think you should leave sketch would get ridiculous, but like it in the movie for some reason it just didn't. It felt like it was like cribbed from another movie. I don't know. Like those things when they suddenly showed up, they didn't always work on me. I feel like the comic vibe just didn't. I don't know. It like conflicted with the rest of the tone.
I mean, as soon as you brought it up, I started laughing because I remember the scene. So you can imagine how hard I was laughing in the moment.
Yeah. Tim Robinson, not Nick Robinson. Nick Robinson is Love Simon. Wrong Robinson.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me still that you felt so flat with this film. I mean, I enjoyed it. I watched with Jamie. She enjoyed it. I think it was... Did you watch this alone?
No, I watched with Joanna, and she liked it more than I did.
Okay.
Like, she thought it was sweet, and I was like, it was fine. It was fine. Like, I'm being negative only because, like, look, I've been in quarantine for a long time, and like a new Seth Rogen movie with a clever premise, like I was excited for that. I was like, oh man, this is gonna do it for me. This is gonna go great, and it just fell flat enough of that I think when it didn't hook me in the first like 20 minutes, I was doomed from that point. I think I was either on or I wasn't, and in this case, I just wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I mean, I think if you settle into the tone, it like things will get you, even things that aren't like jokes. I was still laughing out loud. Like there's a scene later on where Herschel takes Ben to see a spot that he really, really loved. And just the way that the spot has changed in the last 100 years. I just was laughing so hard. And then Ben just
that was a good one. That kind of reminded me of the joy of like Eurovision when there's something like CGI whales in the distance. Like it just seemed like ridiculous.
Yeah. I just like I felt like there was enough of that throughout the film that it kind of kept me really, really going.
I feel like even if it wanted to just steer into this personal, how do I relate with the religion and the culture that I was brought up in, being who I am today, where I know there are A, things that I don't relate to anymore, and then B, things that are kind of abhorrent that those people believed, you know? I don't feel like it really dives into it as deeply as I would like if it wanted to be that movie. Like I feel like the changes that happen in Ben, you know, spoilers, I guess, if you've never seen any movie ever, Ben by the end will feel differently than he does at the beginning. Those don't feel motivated or gradual in the way that I'm used to. It feels very like one moment towards the very end of the movie where the rest comes with it for free. I don't know, there wasn't as much of like a grappling with the legacy as I was kind of hoping there would be, knowing that honestly, I got way more enjoyment out of the episode of What the Fuck last week that Seth Rogen was on when he and Mark Maron were talking about their relationship with Judaism for like an hour and a half. And then Seth got in a lot of trouble because he criticized Israel a bunch and had to apologize. But anyway, like people actually grappling with this.
For this movie to come out then.
Yeah, bad timing. But I don't know. I just felt like people literally grappling with this stuff with words was much more entertaining to me than this movie kind of trying to do it obliquely. And I feel like if it dove in a little bit more deeply, I might have liked it more.
Yeah, I think that this film doesn't necessarily know what it wants to say about that connecting, but I still was touched by that reconnecting. There's a scene where where Seth Rogen is standing with other people who are praying, and he begins to recite that same prayer, which is like, oh, I don't remember this, but it like comes back to him. Like for whatever reason, that was like, that got me good. Like it just him like in that moment giving into it, like felt earned. Obviously it was earned in the way that like he's been pushing against it for so long, but without a real reason to. And in this moment, he's sort of just like willing to give into it, and it kind of comes back and it wells up inside him like it welled up inside me. And I think that stuff works. I don't know what it's saying necessarily and like what specifically it's saying, but it still worked and fit for me and made me feel for the character for having realized the journey he has put himself on in this film, and sort of like taking that moment to step back from that and sort of just be part of this other thing. I felt that dealing with repressed grief much better than I felt in, say, King of Staten Island with like equivalent type scenes in that film, right?
I'll give you that. Yeah, this is more honest than King of Staten Island. Yeah. I'll get handed to you.
Thank you. Podcast
now I
is
have
done.
to see what I rated King of Staten Island. Wow, I was more generous than I thought. Anyway, go on.
No, I think that was sort of the end of my point. I was just sort of
okay, cool.
stating that. So,
yeah, it's fine. Okay, so last question, because you and I have both seen Silicon Valley, so we've seen shows try to deal with the idea of making an app, having a tech startup, funding, and all of that. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel like this movie handled that character detail for Ben?
I'll split my comment into two sides of things. The first way I'll answer the question is that I feel like this handled startup and app development about as close as what was the movie where him and Charlize Theron fall in love?
The Long Shot.
Yeah, The Long Shot. I feel like this handled app development as well as The Long Shot handled journalism or speech writing. And that is to say, not very well. But the second part of that question is, given the current moment of things, I did like the idea of the rationale for why you might or might not get funding being based upon events that happened most recently. I thought that sort of rationale, I thought that was a funny situation, but I think that that obviously it's sort of yada 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 over his app and what it does and how long he's been working on it and stuff like that.
See, the thing I didn't like about how that played out, and maybe this is partly why the fish out of water stuff didn't really work for me, is Ben knows that Herschel just showed up from 100 years ago and he has no concept for anything. But when Ben starts describing his app to him, he is not even trying to use language he thinks he would understand. Like, I don't like when movies do that, where like, to heighten the divide between the characters, they make one talk in a way they would never, ever, ever talk, knowing what they know about the other person. And that like kind of put me in a like extra critical mood during that scene, because I was like, this would never happen.
But on the other hand, you ever know somebody who's always in pitch mode? And when they talk about something, they just say the thing that they always say, and they're not like, they're repeating their pitch all the time. They are not telling you, a specific person who already knows a specific thing, how they feel about a thing. They're going into like, let me pull out my deck.
Yep. Yes, I have met one or two people like that in my life. Point taken. I withdraw my criticism.
But yeah, in general, I think it does yada, yada, yada over like anything related to the business he's trying to create. But still, they still execute well on, I still feel like the whole, where that goes, I think still feels really good in the end.
Yep. I'll give it to you.
Cool. Well, Steven, how about you give me your verdict for this film? If you're going to give this a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving it a wait for rental. I feel like this was just like a straight down the middle movie. It didn't do much for me. There were chuckles to be had. It was fine. I will admit, I probably if I had been more into it in the first 20 minutes, I probably could have rode a wave of enjoyment. It's the kind of movie where it could go either way. It isn't doing much to keep you if you're not into it already, but it probably has plenty to recommend it if you are. So it was fine. It was fine. Just below my expectations.
I'm going to give it a very, very big recommend with a caveat. I'm going to give it a really, really big recommend with a little caveat. There's definitely things that don't hit all the way, but I think if you're in the right mindset and if the beginning gets you, you're going to really, really love this movie like I did. I'm almost tempted to give it a must see, but I can definitely see why you did have the reaction that you did, Steven. And I feel like other people out there who might have passed on this movie might also get that reaction from it.
So big question. If I had raved about this movie, would you have given it a must see? Did I make you see the need for a caveat?
There were things that were happening in real time that I was like, okay, this is kind of dumb, or this is this is falling flat in the moment. But there were also things where I was laughing, and Jamie was just looking at me strange because she's like, you love this movie, don't you? And I think if you were much more positive on it, I might have given it a must see. But so yeah, I don't know if you're trying to push me up into the next category or if you're happy with where I left it.
I'm just asking. I'm just curious because sometimes I do that when you and I talk. If you like a thing a bunch, then my criticism becomes actually he's right. That was better. And sometimes if you dislike it, then I reserve my universal praise a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely can do that too, especially because if you're watching it in sometimes a literal vacuum where it's just you in headphones and no one else in the world, it's hard to figure out how other people could see what you're viewing. And I felt that I just was my pants were charmed off by this film. I really, really enjoyed watching it, but I can see all of your complaints as valid complaints. But for me, they were overpowered by just the raw charm and feel goodness that I got from Herschel, even when he's saying terrible shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool. I think that'll do it for our review of An American Pickle. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/spoilerwarning, Facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or Instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from the soundtrack to An American Pickle, so hopefully you're enjoying that. Yeah, we have one more review to do this week, and that's a review of La Llorona. So we're going to go to that now. We'll see you in a bit.
Brian.
Don't forget, bring back jar, or I will find you, and I will do terrible violence.